My daughter-in-law said, "I'm only protecting our family while having an affair with my husband." And those words still echo in my mind like a twisted joke that nobody else seems to understand. I, 45, F, never imagined my life would turn into something out of a soap opera, but here I am, living proof that sometimes reality is stranger and more painful than any fiction could ever be. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how I discovered the ultimate betrayal happening right under my own roof, orchestrated by the two people I trusted most in this world, and how I turned their own greed against them in ways they never saw coming. John, 52, M, my husband of 23 years, was everything I thought I wanted in a partner when we first met at that corporate mixer all those years ago. He was charming, ambitious, successful, and he made me feel like I was the only woman in the room whenever he looked at me. We built our life together piece by piece, starting with a small apartment downtown, then moving to the suburbs when our son Mark was born, and eventually building the custom home we live in now, complete with the pool and the three-car garage John always dreamed about. Our son Mark grew up to be everything a mother could hope for in a child. He was kind, intelligent, hardworking, and when he brought Jessica home 5 years ago, telling us she was the one, I welcomed her into our family with open arms. She was young, beautiful, ambitious, and she seemed to adore Mark the way he deserved to be adored. When they got married 3 years ago, I cried happy tears at their wedding, thinking about the grandchildren they would give us and the family dinners we would share for decades to come. The family business, a chain of high-end furniture stores that John and I built from nothing over the past 2 decades, was thriving beyond our wildest dreams. We had expanded to 12 locations across 3 states, and our revenue last year hit 8 figures for the first time. Mark worked with us in operations, learning the business from the ground up, while Jessica helped with marketing and social media, bringing fresh ideas that seemed to resonate with younger customers. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American success story, the kind of family that people envied at country club events and charity galas. But something started changing about 8 months ago, though I could initially wrote off as stress from trying to conceive. She and Mark had been trying for a baby for over a year, and I knew the pressure was getting to both of them. She started showing up at the office at odd hours, always with perfectly reasonable explanations about social media scheduling or wanting to avoid traffic. She would bring John coffee in his office, closing the door for what she called marketing strategy sessions that sometimes lasted for hours. When I would knock to join them, thinking my input might be valuable after 20 years in the business, they would quickly change the subject or tell me they were just wrapping up. The little things started adding up in ways that made my stomach twist with an unnamed dread. John's cologne seemed stronger lately, like he was reapplying it during the day. His gym bag was always in his car, but his workout clothes never seemed to need washing. He had a new password on his phone, claiming IT recommended it for security, but he would angle the screen away from me whenever he was typing. Jessica started wearing more makeup to the office, trading her usual casual attire for fitted dresses and heels that seemed excessive for inventory meetings and vendor calls. I told myself I was being paranoid, that 23 years of marriage had earned John the benefit of the doubt, and that Jessica was my daughter-in-law, practically my daughter, and these suspicious thoughts were just my imagination running wild. Maybe I was going through some midlife crisis, projecting my own insecurities onto innocent situations. After all, John had never given me reason to doubt him before, and Jessica was married to our son, for heaven's sake. What kind of mother suspects such horrible things without proof? But the feeling wouldn't go away. That crawling sensation under my skin that something was fundamentally wrong in my perfectly constructed life. I started paying closer attention, not in an obvious way, but with the quiet watchfulness of someone who's afraid of what they might discover. I noticed how John's face would light up when Jessica walked into a room, a brightness I hadn't seen directed at me in years. I saw how their hands would almost touch when she handed him documents, lingering just a beat too long to be casual. I caught the looks they exchanged across the conference room table during meetings, loaded with meaning I couldn't decipher. Mark seemed oblivious to its perception, a shadow I couldn't quite bring into focus. The first time I tried to talk to John about my concerns was 2 months ago, after another late night where he came home smelling like wine, even though he claimed to have been reviewing spreadsheets alone in his office. I sat him down in our bedroom, choosing my words carefully, trying not to sound accusatory or paranoid. I told him I felt like we were growing apart, that he seemed distant lately, that I missed the closeness we used to share. I asked if there was something bothering him, if work stress was getting to him, if there was anything he wanted to talk about. He looked at me with such convincing concern, taking my hands in his, telling me I was imagining things. He said work had been stressful with the new location opening, that he was probably not being as attentive as he should be, that he would make more effort to be present. He suggested we take a vacation, just the two of us. Maybe that resort in Cabo we'd been talking about for years. He pulled me into his arms and held me the way he used to when we were young. And for a moment, I let myself believe that everything was fine, that my suspicious mind was the real enemy here. But the vacation never happened. There was always some crisis at work, some emergency that required his immediate attention. Some reason why we couldn't get away right now, but definitely next month. Definitely soon. Meanwhile, the late nights continued, the distant behavior persisted, and Jessica kept showing up everywhere John happened to be, like she had a GPS tracker on him. They had inside jokes now, references to conversations I hadn't been part of, a casual intimacy that made my skin crawl with recognition of what I was seeing, but still refused to fully acknowledge. I started following him. I'm not proud of it, but I had to know the truth, had to confirm whether I was losing my mind or losing my marriage. I would tell him I was going to my book club or having lunch with friends, then park down the street from the office to watch the parking lot. 3 times I saw them leave together in his car, returning an hour or 2 later, Jessica checking her reflection in the side mirror before they walked back inside separately. I followed them once to a restaurant 2 towns over, watching through the window as they sat in a booth in the back corner, their knees touching under the table, John's hand reaching across to brush something imaginary from her cheek. The night I finally confirmed we'd passed 1,000 times but never had reason to stop at, and I waited in the parking lot like some private detective in a bad movie. I saw John's BMW first, parked in the back corner like he was trying to hide it, though the personalized license plate made it impossible to mistake. 20 minutes later, Jessica's white Audi pulled up beside it, and I watched her check her makeup one more time before getting out, looking around nervously before walking quickly toward the side entrance. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone steady to take pictures. But I managed to document her walking inside, the room number she went to on the 2nd floor, the way the curtains moved as someone let her in. I sat in my car for 2 hours, part of me hoping I was wrong, that there was some innocent explanation for all of this, that they would emerge separately and I could laugh at myself for being such a fool. But when they finally came out together, Jessica's hair mussed despite her attempts to smooth it, John's shirt untucked on one side. Any delusions I'd been clinging to shattered like glass. They kissed in the shadow of the stairwell, not a friendly peck, but the deep, hungry kiss of lovers who can't get enough of each other. And I tasted bile in my throat as I watched my husband of 23 years hold my daughter-in-law the way he once held me. The drive home was a blur of tears and rage and nausea, my mind racing through the implications of what I'd witnessed. How long had this been going on? How many family dinners had we shared while they were sleeping together? How many times had I hugged Jessica, welcoming her into our home, while she was betraying not just me, but Mark. Sweet, innocent Mark who loved her with his whole heart. The scope of the deception was staggering, the cruelty of it beyond comprehension. And I had to pull over twice to vomit on the side of the road, my body physically rejecting the truth I could no longer deny. I didn't confront them right away. Instead, I went into information gathering mode, approaching the situation like the business problems I'd solved over the years. I hired a private investigator, a former cop named DIL who specialized in adultery cases and had the tired eyes of someone who'd seen every possible variation of human betrayal. I gained access to the situation, which I realized with growing horror meant me and Mark. They weren't just having an affair, they were planning a life together, and we were the obstacles in their path. But the worst discovery came when I started digging into the business finances. I'd always trusted John to handle that side of things, focusing my energy on operations and customer relations while he managed the money. What I found in those spreadsheets and bank statements made my blood run cold. Over the past 6 months, John had been slowly restructuring our assets, moving money into accounts I didn't have access to, setting up new corporations with Jessica listed as a partner, preparing to leave me with nothing but debt while they walked away with everything we'd built. The family business that I'd poured my heart and soul into for 2 decades was being systematically looted by my husband and the woman I'd welcomed as a daughter. They'd already transferred ownership of 3 of our locations to a shell company they controlled, and the paperwork for the rest was drawn up and waiting for signatures. Our retirement accounts had been drained under the guise of business investments that were actually purchases of property in Jessica's name. Even our house, the home where we'd raised Mark, where I'd thought we'd grow old together, had been refinanced without my knowledge, the equity pulled out and hidden in offshore accounts. I spent 3 weeks gathering evidence, documenting their betrayal with the thoroughness of a forensic accountant. I learned things about my husband I'd never suspected, like the fact that he'd done this before, 15 years ago with his previous business partner's wife, though that affair had ended when the woman's husband found out and threatened to expose John's creative accounting to the IRS. I discovered that Jessica wasn't the innocent young woman she pretended to be. She'd been married before, briefly, to an older man who died suspiciously in a boating accident, leaving her a substantial insurance payout that had mysteriously disappeared within a year. During those 3 weeks, I had to pretend everything was normal, sitting across from them at family dinners, listening to Mark talk about his plans for the future, watching John and Jessica carefully avoid looking at each other too long while their feet touched under the table. It was torture of the highest order, smiling and nodding while my world burned down around me. But I knew I needed time to protect myself and Mark from the financial devastation they— Mark arrived first, cheerful and curious, helping me set out coffee and the pastries I'd bought from his favorite bakery. John and Jessica arrived separately, maintaining their charade to the end, though I noticed the quick glance they exchanged when they thought no one was looking. I waited until everyone was seated in the living room, the room where we'd celebrated Christmas mornings and birthday parties, and Mark's graduation from college. The room where Jessica had cried happy tears when Mark proposed, where John had taught our son to play chess, where our life as a family had unfolded in all its apparent beauty. I stood by the fireplace, the file folder in my hands feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds, and I looked at each of them in turn before I began to speak. "I know about the affair," I said simply, watching the color drain from John's face while Jessica's hand flew to her throat. Mark looked confused, glancing between his father and his wife, not yet understanding what I was saying. "I know about all of it. The hotels, the dinners, the plans you've made, the money you've stolen. Every single betrayal you thought you'd hidden so well." John started to speak, some denial already forming on his lips, but I held up my hand to stop him. I pulled out the photographs first, the ones from the Hampton Inn, from the restaurants, from the parking garage where they'd been caught on security cameras in a passionate embrace. I set them on the coffee table one by one, like dealing cards in the world's worst poker game, watching Mark's face transform from confusion to horror to a rage I'd never seen in my gentle son before. "How long?" Mark asked, his voice barely a whisper, staring at a photo of his father and wife kissing in John's car. "How long has this been going on?" 6 months at least, I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected, though I suspect the emotional affair started long before that. "Isn't that right, Jessica? When exactly did you decide that seducing my husband was part of your marketing strategy?" Jessica's mask of innocence finally cracked, and something cold and calculating showed through. A hardness I'd glimpsed once or twice but dismissed as ambition. She lifted her chin defiantly, crossing her legs with a casualness that seemed obscene given the circumstances. "I'm only protecting our family," she said, the words so unexpected that I actually laughed, a harsh sound that made Mark flinch. "Played at being helpful, contributing nothing of real value. You're a dinosaur in a changing market, holding the company back with your outdated ideas and your refusal to take risks. John needs someone who understands his vision, someone who can help him achieve his full potential, not someone who's content with mediocrity. The words stung more than I cared to admit, hitting insecurities I'd harbored for years about my role in the business, about whether I was truly John's equal or just riding his coattails. But I pushed those feelings down, focusing on the facts I'd uncovered. Is that what he told you? That I was holding him back? The same line he used on Patricia Reeves 15 years ago before her husband caught them and threatened to expose John's embezzlement? Did he mention that part of his romantic history when he was seducing you? John's face went white at the mention of Patricia, a secret he thought he'd buried forever. Jessica turned to look at him, confusion flickering across her features for the first time. What is she talking about, John? Oh, he didn't tell you about Patricia? I asked with false sympathy. Or about the 2 other affairs I've discovered over the years. You're not special, Jessica. You're just the latest in a long line of women John uses to stroke his ego and help him steal from his business partners. Though I have to admit, you're the first one bold enough to do it with his daughter-in-law. That takes a special kind of moral bankruptcy. Mark had been silent during this exchange, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. But now he turned to Jessica with tears streaming down his face. Our baby, he said, his voice breaking. We've been trying for a baby. Were you ever going to tell me? Were you going to let me raise a child with you while you were sleeping with my father? There was never going to be a baby with you, Jessica said coldly. All pretense of caring dropped completely. I've been on birth control the entire time. Why would I want to have a child with someone who'll never amount to anything more than his parents' shadow? John and I are going to build something new, something better, without the dead weight holding us back. The casual cruelty of her words took my breath away, and I watched my son crumble before my eyes, the devastation complete and total. But as much as my heart broke for Mark, I had to finish what I'd stopped, though it shook with barely controlled panic. Sarah, you don't understand. It's not what it looks like. The restructuring was for tax purposes, to protect the business from liability. Jessica and I, we made a mistake, yes, but the financial arrangements aren't what you think. Save it, I said sharply. I've had 3 different forensic accountants review everything. I know exactly what you've done and how you've done it. I also know it's fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit theft. The only reason you're not in handcuffs right now is because I wanted to have this conversation first, to give you one chance to understand how completely and utterly you've failed. I pulled out the last set of documents, the ones that would destroy them completely. You see, while you 2 were busy planning your great escape, I was planning something of my own. 3 weeks ago, I initiated a full audit of the company, one that revealed not just your recent theft, but years of financial irregularities that John has been hiding. The IRS is very interested in the unreported income, the false deductions, the money laundering through the renovation contracts. They're also interested in Jessica's previous husband's death and the insurance fraud investigation that was mysteriously dropped after she seduced the lead investigator. Jessica's composure finally cracked completely, panic replacing her cold confidence. You can't prove any of that. It's all speculation and lies. Actually, I can prove all of it, I said calmly. Your former lover, Detective Morrison, was very forthcoming once he learned you'd kept recordings of your encounters, recordings you used to blackmail him into dropping the investigation. He's agreed to testify in exchange for immunity, and his testimony, combined with the evidence I've gathered, is more than enough to put you both away for a very long time. The room was silent except for Mark's quiet sobbing, the sound breaking my heart even as I forced myself to continue. This was necessary, all of it, the complete destruction of the people who'd betrayed us so thoroughly. But I'm not going to send you to prison, I said, watching hope flicker in their eyes before I crushed it completely. Prison would be too easy, too quick. Instead, I'm going to destroy you slowly, methodically, the way you tried to destroy me. Into it, which according to my research is nothing but debt from your previous schemes. You can't do this, John said desperately. The business is mine. I built it. You can't just take it away. Actually, I can, I replied. You see, while you were busy transferring assets to your shell companies, you forgot one crucial detail. The original incorporation documents list me as the primary owner, a technicality from when we used my credit to secure the initial loan because yours was ruined from your first bankruptcy. You've been CEO, yes, but I've always been the majority shareholder. Every transfer you made without my signature is invalid, and every attempt to hide assets is further evidence of fraud. The revelation hit John like a physical blow, and he sank into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 52 years and then some. He'd been so confident in his control, so sure of his superiority, that he'd never bothered to check the fundamental structure of what he was stealing. But that's not even the best part, I continued, feeling a dark satisfaction at their stricken faces. You see, I've known about your affair for longer than 3 weeks. I've been planning this for 2 months, ever since I first confirmed what you were doing. And in that time, I've been busy. I've renegotiated our supplier contracts using my ownership authority, contracts that are now ironclad and non-transferable. I've promoted key employees and given them equity stakes that dilute any shares you might claim. I've also hired Mark as Executive Vice President with a contract that makes him my successor, ensuring the business stays in the family, just not the family you two were planning. Mark looked up at me through his tears, surprise mixing with the pain on his face. I walked over and put my hand on his shoulder, feeling him tremble beneath my touch. You're the only innocent one in this room, sweetheart, I said gently, and I'm going to make sure you're protected from their betrayal, financially and otherwise. This is insane, Jessica spat, her composure completely shattered. You can't just destroy our lives like this. John and I love each other. We deserve to be together, to be happy. Love? I laughed, the sound bitter and sharp. You don't know what love is, Jessica. Love is building something together over decades, weathering you after being thoroughly searched for any company property or documentation. Any attempt to contact company employees or clients will be considered a violation of the non-compete clauses in your employment contracts, which are still enforceable despite your termination for cause. You're firing us? John asked, though it sounded more like a statement than a question. I'm firing you with cause, I clarified. Adultery between employees, especially when one is in a supervisory position, is grounds for immediate termination according to the employee handbook you wrote yourself, John. The fraud and embezzlement are just bonus reasons. Your final paychecks will be withheld pending the results of the full audit, and I suspect you'll end up owing the company substantial restitution. Jessica stood up abruptly, her hands shaking with rage. You vindictive bitch. You're destroying everything out of spite, out of jealousy. John was right about you. You're nothing but a bitter, mediocre woman who can't stand that he found someone better. The words should have hurt, but I felt nothing but contempt for this woman who'd pretended to be family while planning our destruction. Better? You think you're better? You're a parasite, Jessica, moving from one host to another, sucking them dry before moving on. The only difference is this time you picked a host who was already infected with his own greed, and now you're both going to starve together. We'll sue, John said desperately. We'll fight this in court. You can't just take everything. You're welcome to try, I said calmly. But your lawyer, the one you've been paying with embezzled funds, has already been notified that his retainer was paid with stolen money. He's withdrawn from representing you to avoid being charged as an accessory. You'll need to find new representation, which you'll have to pay for with your personal funds, the ones that are now frozen pending the divorce proceedings. Good luck with that. I gathered my documents, placing them back in the folder with careful precision. The room felt charged with electricity, with the terrible energy of lives being destroyed and rebuilt simultaneously. Mark was still crying silently. Jessica was pacing like a caged animal, and John looked like he'd aged a decade in the past hour. There's one more thing, I said, pausing at the doorway. The local newspaper has been very interested in the story of a success and Mark. You betrayed the concept of family itself. You violated the most basic trust, the foundational belief that family, even chosen family, protects and supports each other. You weaponized that trust, used it as a tool for your greed, and now everyone will know exactly what kind of people you are. John stood up, taking a step toward me, and for a moment, I saw a flash of the man I'd fallen in love with all those years ago, desperate and broken, and finally understanding the magnitude of his choices. Sarah, please. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can fix this. 23 years has to mean something. It did mean something, I said softly, feeling the weight of all those years, the good mixed with the bad, the love that had turned to betrayal. It meant everything to me. But you threw it away for someone less than half your age, someone who saw you as nothing more than a meal ticket and an ego boost. You made your choice, John. You chose the excitement of an affair over the stability of a marriage. You chose greed over loyalty. You chose her over me and Mark. Now you get to live with those choices. I looked at Mark, my heart breaking for the pain he was enduring. Sweetheart, you're welcome to stay with me for as long as you need. The guest room is already made up, and I've scheduled an appointment with a therapist who specializes in betrayal trauma. This isn't your fault, none of it, and we're going to get through this together. He nodded, unable to speak through his tears, and stood up to follow me. As we walked toward the door, Jessica called out one more time, her voice high and desperate. You're making a mistake, Sarah. You're throwing away a chance for everyone to be happy. John and I could have made the business better, bigger, more successful than you ever imagined. We could have all benefited if you'd just stepped aside gracefully. I turned back one last time, looking at the two of them, disheveled and destroyed, clinging to each other in the wreckage of their schemes. The only mistake I made was trusting you, believing you were the family you pretended to be. But that mistake has been corrected, and you'll never have the chance to fool anyone in this struggling to maintain even a modest lifestyle. Jessica's divorce from Mark was even quicker, the prenuptial agreement making it a straightforward process despite her attempts to claim she'd been coerced into signing it. Her reputation in tatters, she tried to leave town, but found that word of her betrayal had spread throughout the business community. No one wanted to hire someone who'd shown such a spectacular lack of integrity, who'd betrayed family in such a calculated way. The business, freed from John's risky financial maneuvering and Jessica's expensive marketing schemes, actually thrived under my sole leadership. I promoted longtime employees who'd been overlooked by John, people who understood the value of loyalty and hard work. Mark threw himself into his new role, channeling his pain into determination, becoming the leader I always knew he could be without his father's shadow looming over him. 6 months after that horrible Sunday confrontation, I received word through my lawyer that John and Jessica had broken up. The passion that had seemed so overwhelming when it was forbidden and exciting had withered under the harsh light of reality. Without money, without the thrill of deception, without the business to bind them together, they discovered they had nothing in common but greed and selfishness. John was living in a studio apartment, working as a sales associate at a competitor's store. A humiliating decline for someone who'd once considered himself a business titan. Jessica had moved back in with her parents, her attempts to find another wealthy Mark failing as her reputation preceded her everywhere she went. Mark, meanwhile, had begun to heal, though the scars would always be there. He'd started dating a woman from his therapy group, someone who understood betrayal and the long journey back to trust. I watched him slowly rebuild his capacity for love, more cautious now but also more wise. And I felt proud of the strength he'd shown in the face of such devastation. As for me, I discovered that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined, more capable than John had ever given me credit for. The business grew beyond what we'd achieved together, expanding into new markets, developing innovative approaches that John's ego would never have allowed. I found that I didn't need him, had never really needed him, and that revelation was both liberating and slightly sad, a recognition of years wasted believing I was less than I was. The last time I saw John was at an industry for an affair that had meant nothing. Jessica I never saw again, though I heard through the grapevine that she'd tried to run similar schemes in other cities, each time failing as her reputation caught up with her. The internet never forgets, and a simple Google search of her name brought up dozens of articles about the scandal, ensuring that her particular brand of betrayal would follow her forever. Standing in my office now, looking out over the parking lot where I'd once sat crying in my car, I reflect on how much has changed. The pain has faded to a dull ache, a reminder of lessons learned rather than an active wound. The business is thriving, Mark is healing, and I've discovered a version of myself I actually like. Someone strong and capable and unwilling to accept less than she deserves. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how I handled things, if I think I was too harsh in my revenge. They suggest that forgiveness might have been the higher road, that destroying John and Jessica so completely was excessive. To those people, I say this. Forgiveness is for people who make mistakes, who show remorse, who try to make amends. What John and Jessica did wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated betrayal planned over months, executed with precision, intended to leave Mark and me with nothing while they prospered from our loss. They showed no mercy in their plans for us, no consideration for the pain they would cause, no hesitation in their destruction of our family. They revealed themselves to be predators, users who saw kindness as weakness and trust as opportunity. People like that don't deserve forgiveness. They deserve consequences, and I made sure they faced every single one. The truth is, I sleep perfectly well at night knowing that John is struggling to make rent while the empire we built together continues to grow under my leadership. I feel no guilt knowing that Jessica's attempts to seduce her way to success have been permanently thwarted by her exposed history. They made their choices with full knowledge of the potential consequences, gambling that I was too weak or too trusting to fight back. They lost that gamble spectacularly. Mark and I have grown closer through this ordeal, our bond strengthened by shared survival. We've learned to trust again, carefully and with wisdom, understanding that family isn't just about blood or marriage. Deception John and Jessica perpetrated, impossible. I've also started dating again, tentatively and with appropriate caution, but with an openness to the possibility of love that surprises me. The man I'm seeing now, a widow who understands loss and rebuilding, treats me with a respect and admiration John never showed, even in our best years. He sees me as an equal, a partner, someone whose opinions and contributions matter. It's a revelation to be valued for who I am, rather than tolerated for what I provide. Looking back on that Sunday afternoon when I exposed their affair, I remember the woman I was then, shaking with rage and pain, barely holding it together as I confronted the two people who'd betrayed me most. I was strong that day, but I was also broken, devastated by the realization that my life had been built on lies and deception. That woman deserved justice, deserved to see her betrayers face the consequences of their actions, deserved to reclaim what they'd tried to steal from her. But the woman I am now, standing in this office that belongs solely to me, running this business that thrives under my leadership, surrounded by people who genuinely respect and support me. This woman is something more than just a survivor. I'm proof that betrayal doesn't have to define you, that you can take the worst thing that ever happened to you and transform it into the catalyst for becoming who you were always meant to be. John and Jessica thought they were destroying me, thought I would crumble without them, thought I was nothing more than an obstacle to their happiness. Instead, they freed me from illusions I didn't even know I was carrying, forced me to discover strength I didn't know I possessed, and ultimately gave me the gift of seeing myself clearly for the first time in decades. I wasn't the weak, dependent woman they'd portrayed me as. I was a survivor, a fighter, a force to be reckoned with. The irony is that if they'd simply asked for a divorce, if they'd been honest about their feelings and desires, we could have dissolved things civilly. The business could have been divided equitably. Mark could have been spared the worst of the trauma. and everyone could have moved on to new lives without the nuclear destruction that followed. But their greed wouldn't allow for that. Their narcissism demanded they take everything while leaving nothing, and that fundamental cruelty is what sealed their fate. I think about Jessica and betrayal. Doomed from the start because relationships founded on deception can never survive the harsh light of truth. The real family, the one she was actually destroying, was the one that had welcomed her with open arms, that had given her opportunities and trust and love she'd never earned. She confused exploitation with protection, greed with love, and ultimately destroyed everything she claimed to be saving. Mark has started therapy specifically focused on betrayal trauma, working through the unique pain of being deceived by both a spouse and a parent simultaneously. His therapist says it's one of the most severe cases of relational betrayal she's encountered, the double violation making trust feel impossible. But Mark is strong, stronger than his father ever was, and he's doing the hard work of healing, rather than running from the pain into another destructive relationship. He's told me that in some ways, seeing his father's true character revealed has been liberating, freeing him from the constant pressure of trying to live up to impossible standards set by someone who had no real integrity. He's discovering who he is outside of his father's shadow, what he values independent of what he was taught. And the man he's becoming is someone I'm incredibly proud to call my son. We've had long conversations about trust, about how to rebuild it after such fundamental betrayal, about how to remain open to love while protecting yourself from predators. I've shared my own journey, the walls I've had to build and slowly, carefully lower, the way I've learned to trust my instincts that warned me something was wrong, even when I didn't want to believe it. We're navigating this new reality together. Two survivors building something genuine from the ruins of what was false. The business continues to exceed all projections, and I've been approached by several larger corporations interested in buying us out. The offers are tempting, enough money to never work again, to travel the world and leave all of this behind. But I won't sell. Not yet. Maybe not ever. This business is more than just stores and inventory. It's proof that I could succeed without John, that his constant undermining of my abilities was projection of his own insecurities rather than reflection of reality. Every successful quarter, every new location we open, every innovation we implement is a reminder that John was wrong about me, that Jessica was wrong about me, that I was wrong about myself. I'm not weak or mediocre or holding anyone back. False things can have real moments within them, that the marriage wasn't entirely a lie, even if it ended in deception. Mark deserved that happy family in the photo, deserved parents who loved each other as much as they loved him. And the fact that he didn't get that is the one thing I'll never forgive John for. The extended family has been interesting to navigate in the aftermath. John's mother, who always preferred him despite his flaws, initially tried to defend him, suggesting that men have needs and perhaps I hadn't been meeting them. I cut her off mid-sentence, informing her that her son's needs apparently included embezzlement and fraud alongside adultery, and that if she wanted to maintain any relationship with Mark, she'd keep her opinions about the situation to herself. She chose Mark, wisely, though she still sends John money that he spends on alcohol and self-pity. My own family has been supportive but shocked, unable to reconcile the John they thought they knew with the man revealed by his actions. My sister, always protective, offered to have him dealt with by her biker boyfriend's club, an offer I declined but appreciated in spirit. My parents, married 53 years and still genuinely in love, simply couldn't understand how someone could betray their family so completely. They've become Mark's refuge when everything feels too heavy, their stable love a reminder that not all marriages are built on deception. The employees who remained with the company through the transition have become like a second family, united by the shared experience of watching everything we'd built almost destroyed by greed. They've shown remarkable loyalty, turning down offers from competitors, working extra hours during the restructuring, and celebrating each success like it's a personal victory. I've made sure their loyalty is rewarded, with profit-sharing programs and advancement opportunities John never would have approved. One of our longest-term employees, Margaret, who'd worked with us since the beginning, told me she'd suspected the affair for months but hadn't known how to tell me. She'd seen the looks, noticed the pattern of their absences, felt the shift in dynamics that I'd initially missed. She apologized for not warning me, but I told her there was nothing to apologize for. The betrayal was entirely John and Jessica's responsibility, and no one else should carry guilt for their choices. The legal aftermath continues even now, with forensic accountants still uncovering been equally persistent. The investigation into her first husband's death was reopened based on the evidence I provided, and while they couldn't prove murder, they found enough evidence of insurance fraud to charge her. She's currently on probation, unable to leave the state, required to report her every move to authorities who watch her like the predator she's proven herself to be. The woman who thought she was so clever, who believed she could manipulate everyone around her, is now trapped by her own history of deception. I've received letters from both of them, delivered through lawyers because of the restraining orders. John's are rambling apologies mixed with accusations, taking responsibility in one sentence and blaming me in the next, a narcissist's attempt at reconciliation that only reveals how little he understands the magnitude of his betrayal. Jessica's letters are more calculating, offering information about John's other affairs in exchange for dropping the criminal complaints, trying to bargain her way out of consequences like everything is a transaction. I don't respond to either of them. There's nothing left to say. No words that could undo what they did or change who they revealed themselves to be. They're strangers to me now. People I thought I knew but never really did. And engaging with them would only give them the attention they're desperately seeking. My silence is its own form of revenge, a refusal to provide the emotional response they're hoping to provoke. The community response has been overwhelmingly supportive, with customers going out of their way to shop at our stores, expressing solidarity with a local business that survived such a public betrayal. We've become something of a symbol for resilience, for the possibility of thriving after devastation. And while I never wanted to be the face of betrayal and recovery, I've tried to use the platform responsibly. I've spoken at several women's business groups about recognizing financial manipulation in relationships, about the importance of understanding your business's structure and finances, even if you trust your partner, about the red flags I missed and the ones I couldn't have seen coming. The stories I hear in return are heartbreaking and infuriating. Woman after woman who discovered too late that their trust had been weaponized against them, who lost everything to partners who saw them as opportunities rather than equals. These conversations have led to the creation of a foundation, funded by the company's profits, that provides legal and financial assistance in such betrayal. About the struggle to maintain relationships with both parents when one has so fundamentally wronged the other. His honesty about his anger toward John, his complicated grief for the father he thought he had, resonates with other adult children of similar situations. He's chosen to maintain no contact with John, a decision I support completely, though I've made it clear I would understand if he eventually wanted a relationship with his father. Mark says maybe someday, when the anger isn't so raw, when he can look at John without seeing Jessica in his arms. But that day hasn't come yet, and may never arrive. The man who was supposed to be his role model instead became his cautionary tale. And that reversal has fundamentally changed how Mark sees the world. As the 2-year anniversary of that Sunday confrontation approaches, I find myself reflecting on the journey from devastation to triumph. The woman who sat in that parking lot, watching her husband kiss her daughter-in-law, feels like a different person entirely. Someone I remember with compassion, but no longer recognize as myself. That woman was afraid of being alone, of losing the life she'd built, of admitting that her instincts about danger were correct. This woman, the one I've become, isn't afraid of being alone because she's learned that she's excellent company. She hasn't lost the life she built. She's revealed that she was the one building it all along. And she trusts her instincts completely, understanding that the subtle warnings she'd dismissed were her subconscious recognizing threats her conscious mind wasn't ready to acknowledge. The house feels different now, lighter somehow, as if the weight of deception has been physically lifted from its foundations. I've redecorated completely, removing every trace of John's presence, creating spaces that reflect who I am, rather than who I was trying to be for him. Mark helped me convert John's office into a library, floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with the books John always mocked me for reading, the business guides and mysteries and biographies that he said were wastes of time, but which taught me everything I needed to know about recognizing deception and planning strategic responses. The master bedroom, where I'd lain beside a stranger for who knows how long, has been transformed into a sanctuary of my own design. The bed is new. The sheets are the high thread count John always said were unnecessarily expensive. And I sleep Pichu. Each journey a reminder that the world is vast and beautiful, and full of experiences that have nothing to do with the small, ugly world John and Jessica tried to trap me in. On these travels, I meet women with similar stories, betrayals and recoveries, destructions and rebuildings. We recognize each other somehow, survivors of a particular kind of intimate warfare, and we share our stories over wine and sunset views, finding strength in the knowledge that we're not alone, that recovery is possible, that thriving after betrayal is the ultimate revenge. One woman I met in Tuscany told me something that stuck with me. They thought they were the main characters in your story, but they were just plot devices for your character development. It's true. John and Jessica believed they were writing the ending to my story, a pathetic conclusion where I faded into irrelevance while they rode off into the sunset. Instead, they were simply the catalyst for my transformation, the antagonists whose actions forced the protagonist to discover her true power. The business now has a succession plan that doesn't depend on family relationships, but on merit and loyalty. Mark will likely take over when I retire, but he'll earn it through his work rather than his birthright. And if someone else proves more capable, they'll get the opportunity instead. I've learned that family isn't always trustworthy, and strangers aren't always dangerous. That the titles we give relationships don't determine their value or their threat. I've also implemented strict policies about financial transparency in the company, regular audits by independent firms, and multiple signatures required for any significant transactions. Trust is beautiful, but verification is necessary, and creating systems that don't rely on trust alone protects everyone from temptation and accusation alike. If John had faced these checks and balances from the beginning, perhaps his greed wouldn't have had room to grow into the monster that destroyed everything. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never discovered the affair, if they'd been more careful or I'd been less observant. Would they have succeeded in their plan, leaving Mark and me with nothing while they started their new life with our resources? The thought chills me, not just for what we would have lost financially, but for the psychological devastation of such a betrayal, discovered too late to prevent it. Years of his condescension and dismissal had taught me to work quietly, to build relationships and gather information without drawing attention, to present myself as less capable than I was to avoid triggering his ego. These survival tactics in an emotionally neglectful marriage turned out to be perfect training for investigating and exposing his betrayal without alerting him to my knowledge until I was ready to strike. Jessica, for all her supposed understanding of John's vision, never understood that his vision was fundamentally flawed, based on short-term gains and personal glory rather than sustainable growth and stakeholder value. Her marketing strategies were all flash and no substance, expensive campaigns that brought temporary attention but no lasting customer loyalty. Since her departure, we've returned to the community-focused, relationship-based marketing that built our reputation in the first place, and our customer retention rates have never been higher. The employees who worked under John have told me how different the environment is now, how they feel valued and heard in ways they never did before. John's management style was fear-based, with constant threats of termination and public humiliation for perceived failures. Jessica enhanced this toxicity with her own brand of manipulation, pitting employees against each other and taking credit for others' ideas. The workplace they created was one of anxiety and mistrust, where creativity was stifled and innovation was impossible. Now, we have regular team meetings where every voice matters, suggestion boxes that are actually reviewed and implemented, and a culture of collaborative problem-solving that's led to innovations John never would have imagined. The employee turnover rate has dropped to nearly zero, and we have waiting lists of qualified candidates hoping to join our team. The business they said I would destroy through weakness has become stronger through the very qualities they mocked: empathy, collaboration, and genuine care for our people. I've kept the investigator's report, all the photographs and evidence of their betrayal, locked in a safety deposit box I never visit. It's not a shrine to pain or a weapon held in reserve. It's simply proof that it really happened, that I didn't imagine or exaggerate the betrayal, that my response was proportionate to their actions. Someday, perhaps, I'll destroy it all. But for now, its existence serves as a reminder that I'm not crazy, that gaslighting only works when you don't have like he's a stepping stone to something better. I've met her parents, good people who were horrified by what their daughter's boyfriend had endured, who've gone out of their way to show us both that not all families harbor betrayers. They invited us for holidays, included us in their traditions, created space for us in their lives without question or judgment. It's healing in a way I didn't expect, being accepted into another family's warmth, being reminded that trust and loyalty do exist even if they're not guaranteed. The financial recovery has been complete and then some. The money John and Jessica tried to steal has been recovered through legal action and careful management. The business valuation has tripled since their departure, a combination of improved operations, better employee morale, and the unexpected publicity from surviving such a public scandal. What they meant to destroy has instead flourished, living proof that sometimes the best revenge truly is massive success. I've been asked to write a book about the experience, publishers offering significant advances for the inside story of the betrayal and recovery. I've declined them all, not because I'm ashamed or trying to protect anyone, but because I've already given this story all the time and energy it deserves. Writing a book would mean reliving every moment in detail, dwelling on the pain rather than the recovery. And I have better things to do with my time than memorialize the worst thing that ever happened to me. Besides, the story isn't really over, is it? I'm still here, still building, still discovering who I am in this new chapter. Mark is still healing, still growing, still becoming the man he's meant to be. The business is still evolving, still finding new ways to serve our community and support our employees. The ending John and Jessica tried to write was really just the beginning of something much better, and that's the story that matters now. I heard recently that John had a heart attack, a minor one, but enough to land him in the hospital for a week. His mother called to tell me, perhaps hoping for sympathy or support. But I felt nothing beyond a vague hope that he has good insurance. The man in that hospital bed isn't my concern anymore, isn't my responsibility, isn't even someone I know. He's a stranger who happens to share memories with someone I used to be, and those memories lose their power with each passing day. Jessica apparently tried to visit in my office overlooking the parking lot where everything changed. I realized that gratitude might be too strong a word for what I feel about John and Jessica's betrayal, but there's definitely something approaching appreciation for the involuntary transformation they triggered. Without their betrayal, I might have spent the rest of my life in a mediocre marriage, accepting less than I deserved, believing I was less than I was. Their cruelty freed me from illusions I didn't know I was carrying. Their greed revealed my own strength and resourcefulness. Their betrayal forced me to confront fears and insecurities that had held me back for decades. They meant to destroy me, but instead catalyzed my becoming. And while I wouldn't wish that pain on anyone, I can't deny that I prefer who I am now to who I was then. The woman who stood in that living room 2 years ago, delivering the evidence of their betrayal with cold precision, was running on pure adrenaline and rage. But the woman sitting here now, reflecting on the journey from that moment to this one, operates from a place of genuine peace and authentic power. I don't need anger anymore because I have justice. I don't need revenge anymore because I have success. I don't need validation anymore because I have self-knowledge. Mark told me recently that he started to feel sorry for his father. Not forgiveness, but a kind of pitying recognition of how empty John's life must be. All those years of scheming and manipulating, of using people and discarding them, of choosing greed over love. And what does he have to show for it? A string of broken relationships, a reputation in ruins, a son who won't speak to him, and a future of struggle and loneliness. Meanwhile, we've built something real and lasting. Relationships based on trust and respect, success earned through integrity and hard work, a future bright with possibility. He could have had everything, Mark said, shaking his head in bewilderment. If he'd just been honest, if he'd been faithful, if he'd valued what he had instead of always wanting more, he could have had everything. But that's the thing about people like John and Jessica. They can never have everything because they can never have enough. There's always something more to want, someone else to use, another scheme to run. They're black holes of need, consuming everything around them but never feeling satisfied, always hungry. That's taken me far from who and where I was. I've learned that forgiveness isn't necessary for healing, despite what all the self-help books say. I haven't forgiven John or Jessica, and I likely never will, but I've released them from my active consideration. They're not forgiven, but they're also not important enough to hate anymore. They're footnotes in my story, cautionary tales I share when appropriate, examples of what not to do and who not to trust. But they're not main characters anymore. The main characters now are the people who've shown up with integrity and loyalty. Mark, who chose truth over comfort. Our employees, who stayed through the chaos. My family, who supported without judgment. New friends who've entered my life as I've become who I really am. These are the people who matter, who deserve my time and energy and consideration, who've earned trust through consistent action rather than demanding it through manipulation. Looking toward the future, I see expansion possibilities for the business that John never would have considered. Partnerships with local artisans, community programs that build customer loyalty while doing genuine good, innovative approaches that honor our history while embracing change. I see Mark growing into a leader who combines the best of both his parents without the worst of either, who's learned from our mistakes and our successes alike. I see myself continuing to evolve, to discover capabilities I didn't know I had, to build relationships based on equality and respect, to create a life that's authentically mine rather than a performance for someone else's approval. The possibilities seem endless now, in a way they never did when I was trapped in a marriage that made me smaller, in a partnership that diminished my contributions, in a life that wasn't really mine. The title of this story, My Daughter-in-Law Said I'm Only Protecting Our Family While Having an Affair with My Husband, captures the absurdity and cruelty of their betrayal. But it doesn't capture the triumph that followed. Jessica thought she was protecting the family she and John would create, but she only succeeded in revealing the strength of the family she tried to destroy. She protected us, in a way, from continuing to live with deception, from building our future on a foundation of lies, from trusting people who deserved no trust. If I could go back and change things, would I? Would I prevent the affair? Keep John faithful? Maintain the illusion of was the price of transformation. And while it was a high price to pay, the person I've become was worth every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of rage and grief and fear. John and Jessica thought they were the architects of my destruction, but they were actually the architects of my liberation. They thought they were stealing my future, but they were actually freeing me to create a better one. They thought they were the winners in this story, but they were just catalysts for my victory, and their defeat is as complete as my triumph. The business they tried to steal is mine alone. The son they betrayed has chosen me completely. The money they tried to hide has been recovered with interest. The reputation they tried to destroy has been replaced with one of strength and resilience. The life they tried to end has been reborn as something far better than what it was. Every single thing they reached for has slipped through their fingers, while everything they tried to take from me has returned multiplied. This is what karma looks like. Not some mystical force, but the natural consequence of choices made and actions taken. They chose deception. They received exposure. They chose greed. They received poverty. They chose betrayal. They received abandonment. They chose to destroy trust. They received a lifetime of suspicion. Every cruel choice they made has been returned to them in kind, while every moment of integrity I maintained has been rewarded beyond my imagination. As I close this reflection, 2 years after the revelation that changed everything, I want to be clear about something. This isn't a story about revenge, even though revenge was certainly part of it. This is a story about discovery, about finding out who you really are when everything you thought you knew is stripped away. It's about the strength that emerges from survival, the wisdom that comes from betrayal, the freedom that follows destruction. To anyone reading this who sees themselves in my story, who's discovered deception in their own life, who's facing the destruction of everything they thought was real, know this: you're stronger than you think. The pain you're feeling is real and valid and deserves to be acknowledged. But it's not permanent. The person who betrayed you has revealed their character, but they haven't determined your future. The life you thought you lost might have been an illusion, but the life you can build from here is entirely— She was protecting our family while having an affair with my husband. But in the end, she was right in a way she never intended. She did protect us, Mark and me, from continuing to live a lie. She protected us from wasting more years on people who didn't deserve our trust. She protected us from the slow poison of deception that would have eventually destroyed us anyway. Her betrayal was our liberation. Her cruelty was our catalyst. And her defeat is our triumph. The family she was protecting, the real family of Mark and me, and all those who've stood by us with loyalty and love, is stronger now than ever before. We've been tested by fire and emerged purified, bonded by survival and strengthened by adversity. We know who we can trust because we've seen who we couldn't. We know our own strength because we've had to use it. We know our worth because we've had to defend it. And John? John has exactly what he deserves. A life built on deception that crumbles a little more each day. Relationships based on exploitation that inevitably fail. A future of loneliness and regret that he created with his own choices. He thought he was trading up, moving from an aging wife to a younger model, from a stable life to an exciting affair, from shared success to sole control. Instead, he traded everything of value for nothing of substance, and now he gets to live with that choice forever. Jessica thought she was clever, seducing a married man with access to wealth and success, planning to take everything while contributing nothing, using her youth and beauty as weapons in a war we didn't know we were fighting. But cleverness without wisdom is just cunning, and cunning only works until it's exposed. Now she's known as the woman who betrayed her own husband with his father, who tried to steal from the family that welcomed her, who destroyed everything she touched with her greed. Their story together lasted less than 6 months after the exposure. The passion that seemed so overwhelming when it was secret and forbidden, withering under the harsh light of consequences. Without the thrill of deception, without the promise of stolen wealth, without the excitement of betrayal, they discovered they had nothing in common but selfishness. And two selfish people can never sustain a relationship because eventually, they'll turn that selfishness on each other. I heard through the grapevine that their breakup was as ugly as their affair, full of pathetic when faced with consequences. They deserved each other, and they deserve the emptiness they're left with now that their mutual destruction is complete. As for me, I'm writing this final chapter not from a place of anger or bitterness, but from a place of genuine gratitude for the journey, as painful as it was. I'm grateful for the truth, even though it hurt. I'm grateful for the revelation of character, even though it was ugly. I'm grateful for the opportunity to rebuild, even though I wouldn't have chosen it. I'm grateful for the person I've become, even though the becoming was brutal. The woman who started this story, who discovered her husband with her daughter-in-law, who had to face the destruction of everything she thought was real, that woman was a victim. But the woman ending this story, who built an empire from ruins, who protected her son from financial and emotional devastation, who turned betrayal into triumph. This woman is a survivor, a warrior, a victor. My daughter-in-law said she was only protecting our family while having an affair with my husband. In the end, by destroying the false family, she revealed the real one. By attempting to steal our future, she gave us a better one. By betraying our trust, she taught us who deserved it. She protected us from her and from John, from continuing to live with wolves in sheep's clothing, from building our lives on a foundation of lies. So thank you, Jessica, for showing us who you really were. Thank you, John, for finally revealing your true character after 23 years of deception. Thank you both for your betrayal, your greed, your cruelty. Because without it, Mark and I would never have discovered our own strength, would never have built something genuine and lasting, would never have learned the difference between real family and the illusion of it. You thought you were ending our story, but you were just ending the prologue. The real story, the one where we triumph over adversity and build something beautiful from the ashes of what you destroyed. That story is just beginning. And unlike your story, which ended in exposure and disgrace and loneliness, ours will end in success and genuine connection, and the kind of happiness that comes from earning everything you have through integrity and hard work. This is my story, my truth, my victory, and every single